think the casting is spot on too. And just watching Kirsten Dunst, who was 17 when she made this, and Denise Richards was 29, Amy Adams was 25. But I think Kirsten Dunst is so earnest and has such a welcoming presence in this. So even some of her sort of messed up lines that she says in this, she just pulls off really well. Like, yeah, most of the guys leave town. They either go on hockey scholarships or prison. And you're
Right.
just, it's just, I don't know. I love the way she delivers it, and she works in a morgue and she taps, and just her relationship with Allison Janney, and also too, John. This movie delivers. This movie didn't deliver on a lot of things that were expected of quote unquote teen movies. There's no core relationship, right? There's no love interest. He gets shot in the head very early on, so there's no like, you know what I mean? There's no core boy meets girl meet cute.
It's funny that you say that this second, because I watched this movie, what, twice in the last week or so, and it never crossed my mind, nor do any of my notes even acknowledge this as a teen movie. I don't necessarily. I don't know who this movie was made for, but like it's like you said about how you appreciate it now versus then. I feel like this was made more for us to see as adults all the people this is poking fun at, rather than the teenagers, even though the stars you'd think in a trailer are meant to relate to the 18 to 25 or the 15 to 25 crowd. But I feel like this was made for us. It was advertised for them and made for us.
Absolutely. And and also too, let's look at the way that the character, how Kirsten Dunst is done, Amber Atkins moves up in the world. She gets into the pageant, and well, she's supposed to be killed with a light, but she dodges that. She then loses to Denise Richards, but Denise Richards blows up in
Right.
a float from Mexico, of course. She blows up. And then she goes to, what, Miss Minnesota, Sarah Rose Cosmetics, and MMA. They all get shellfish poisoning. So she's the last one left.
Because she doesn't need anything that can carry its home on its back.
Yes! Oh, I love that. That's so cool. And so all of them go down. Then, I love that Nationals, they just go out of business and all the ladies just destroy the company. But then Kirstie Alley goes on a shooting spree from
Right.
a
She
rooftop
breaks out of prison.
sniper, kills a reporter, I believe, and then Amber Atkins picks up the mic and gets her job. So all this death I mean, actually, Tammy blows up. Remember, Tammy gets killed. So
Yep.
Tammy might have won the thing if she was in it because she's just that good at stuff. So Tammy dies. Becky Ann Lehman dies. Shellfish poisoning, and then the reporter gets shot. And that's how she works her way up the chain. This isn't Rudy, folks. This is, and I love
This
when
is
they're like, people can work for it. No, it's dumb luck. Like they
this is
say it's,
Jack Burton.
yeah, this is Jack Burton just falling into things. And then, sorry, another thing, I took some notes. In 1999, and we've talked about this a decent amount. 1999, I mean, we've covered so many of the 1999 movies on the podcast, and I was going through it, and I was just thinking about all the teen movies. We've covered a few, American Pie. We also covered Election. We talked about Detroit Rock City. But I was going through, and 1998, they had The Faculty that came out. Then it was Varsity Blues, which opened at number one. Then it was She's All That, opened at number one. October Sky, kind of a teenage movie. It was kids. Number four. Cruel Intentions was number two. Then you had The Rage Carry 2, number two. 10 Things I Hate About You, number two. When I say two, that's opened at number two at the box office. Never Been Kissed, opened at number two. Idle Hands, number seven. Election, opened at fifth. American Pie, opened at one. The Wood, opened at six. And then you have this movie opening up at 11. So this is July, and you've had this many teen flicks coming out. So I wonder, I know this was only released in 1,200 theaters, and a lot of people, the marketers didn't really know what to do with this little film, but I wonder if there's a bit of, like, teenage fatigue, because I bet you by this time adults are like, holy crap, there's so many of these movies coming out. I'm not going to go watch it, because it's lumped in with American Pie and all these, and so adults are like, I'm going to avoid this. Like, this is a teenager flick. And then teenagers didn't go watch it, because it was dumped at the end of July in 1,200 theaters and gone. So I wonder if all those elements combined, plus really negative reviews, I don't really understand nowadays, like combined to really just bury this picture.
I think this is brilliant.
Yeah. What were people? Do you think it was fatigue, John? Do you think people were just like, she's all that, cruel intentions, 10 things I hate about you, never been kissed, idle hands, election, American Pie, like, just, I'm exhausted. Like, I'm exhausted from teen flicks, because there was a very angry agenda against this movie. Like, you read some of these reviews, it's so painfully unfunny. I'm like, what movie were you watching?
This is funnier than any of the movies you mentioned. I
know, but like, there had to have been a fatigue, or, I mean, this was jumped on. So, I just think it maybe if this was released of January of that year, and it wasn't in the summer, and it wasn't before or after all these movies, if people would like it more. Because I don't know how you watch this and go, this is not funny.
I do totally get, because I've been a victim of it. There have been a lot of movies where on my first watch, I never liked it. And then whether you suggested it, 10 years later or 5 years later or 1 year later, or we discussed it on the pod, there have been plenty of movies where I remember just disliking it. But in hindsight, I didn't know what it was. I thought it was something else, and I arrived for something else and just didn't get it. And so if I arrive for this uppity teen comedy, and I get a lot of smart, adult, heavy-handed satire that maybe wasn't delivered even as much as the trailer suggested, even though it's very clear in the trailer. Like, I don't know, maybe I just thought I was going to watch something else. I had myself mentally in a different mood. But then once I know what a movie is and I watch it again, I'm like, this doesn't bother me. And once the things that bothered me before don't bother me, it opens the doors to enjoying other aspects of the film. And that might be one of the biggest problems. I'm not attacking anybody here, but one of the biggest problems with new movie reviews. They are being reviewed by someone who saw it once, probably without properly knowing what they were getting into. When we review a movie, not to say that we're better than someone reviewing movies for a paper, right? But when we review a movie, first off, we watch it more than once.
I can't always. Sometimes some new ones you can't, but for the most part, right?
For the podcast, for
the podcast, got it.
Yeah. What we're doing right now, we watched the movie more than once, and not only that, we had seen it before, and we decided, let's record on that. Yeah, that's a great idea, Mark. I haven't seen that in forever. Let's do. And then we watch it with fresh eyes because it's been so long. Even though we don't remember much, we're just more open-minded about what we're doing. We didn't pay $20 to go see it at the IMAX nowadays. We just got an $8 Blu-ray, and it was very casual, and we can watch it twice. Again, we can really find its feeling.
And do a lot of research. And there's been more time for 20-year articles to come out, and it's had time to become a cult classic and reevaluated, right? So that's been good for us.
And we get to enjoy looking at what these actors have done since.
I think this is Denise Richards' best performance. I don't see where she's ever been utilized.
I want to agree. I don't think I can come up with anything that would counter that.
Because I think
Dunst did an amazing job.
Oh yeah, too. Just her earnestness and just watching her like that. There's a wide shot of her going down a picnic bench and then tapping on the side of the road. And
the tapping down the side of the road. Yeah. That scene stuck with me for 20 years. And then I watched again. I'm like, with the music going and the editing, that was really an electric, affecting scene.
You know what's interesting about her character, too, is that I think you and I, and correct me if I'm wrong, I mean, we watched the John Hughes movies of the 80s. We watched the movies of the 90s. We watched the TV shows of the 90s where there were nerds. There were poor kids who were bad. There were jocks versus socias. There were the Breakfast Club. The richness of, like, the John Hughes world. And then we get Kirsten Dunst's character, Amber, who lives in a trailer park, is totally happy with herself, loves her mom, has Allison Janney hanging out. She's working all the time, totally comfortable working. She's cleaning plates, and this guy's like, hey, do you want to hang out? Like, do you want to go, let me take you on a date? That's something, she's all that year. We had paint-stained overalls. And then we had, Intolerable Cruelty, where they took Selma Blair and they were going to make her like something new. And we had like Clueless, where they take Brittany Murphy's character and make her cool, and the various levels of that. This movie didn't really have any of that. It just sort of had people who were comfortable in their own skin, I would say, to a certain extent. And that was something different than what we had ever been given before.
They embraced the tropes of like the alcoholic mom and her hussy best friend, right?
I got some.
Right, and them being whatever poor, and her being the one, and she's working at lunch at school, right? So but again, yeah, she's getting hit on by the captain of the football team. She has a wonderful relationship with her mom and the neighbor, right? So I see what you mean.
Yeah,
they're spinning it.
We're not given that, right? Because I was looking at these other movies, and you just have Detroit Rock City, the rockers versus the preppies, and there's different levels to this community, but I don't know, it was quite interesting. It was. It's another thing too, where you're like, oh, we're gonna get a Varsity Blues where he becomes popular and loses his friends, or Never Been Kissed where she becomes popular. 10 Things I Hate About You. You have to turn the shrew into a popular girl because of Heath Ledger. And I just kind of dig it. And you know what's interesting? I think 1999 is home to some very unique teen films that are, well, I was gonna say R-rated, but Drop Dead Gorgeous isn't R-rated. But I do love Election. Election's like one of my favorite movies. But I think the critics loved it. But I think if you were a teenager going to watch it, you're like, what's going on here?
Well, again, that's a very mature content movie with a heavy teen cast.
And so you're thinking, I guess if you're a kid and you're in this summer of all these movies, you're like, I'm going to go watch this. And I remember loving Election. The first day I got my job at when I got back at AMC, I went and watched Election again because I love that movie so much. And then Jawbreaker came out later on in the year, and that movie is more outwardly mean than Drop Dead Gorgeous, but that one didn't do well at all too. But I like all three because, I mean, Election's clearly not a teen film; it's kind of an Alexander Payne movie. But I like there's some pretty subversive high school stuff coming out in '99 with the She's All That, Varsity Blues, Never Been Kissed. So it was an interesting dynamic that year of high school themed movies that sort of kept me on my toes a little bit. One day you're watching Never Been Kissed, the next day you're watching Election, the next day you're watching Idle Hands, and then you're doing American Pie, then you got The Wood. Like, you're all like, what is happening here? Like, what? It was just a neat, good year for high school pictures, I would say.
Yeah, no, I gotta agree, and a lot of kind of genre spinning high school pictures, a lot of very mature high school pictures. And even though like Fast Times at Ridgemont High was very mature, I mean, Fast Times at Ridgemont High though was a mature high school movie for high schoolers.
Yeah.
I still like it now, right? But Election was a mature high school movie for a more mature audience.
Yeah.
And this is a mature high school movie for a more mature audience. And Idle Hands, well, it's R-rated and it's in a horror movie, so regardless of who they're marketing it to, a lot of people who wanted to see it couldn't see it.
Yeah.
Potentially, right? And so, yeah, that was a time, and even Never Been Kissed. I loved that movie when it was new, but I loved that movie much. Let me rephrase. I liked that movie when it was new. I loved that movie when I was in my 20s, and I was not romantically mature, but I was a hell of a lot more romantically mature than 18-year-old John, right? And so I really appreciated the Drew Barrymore character while still being young enough to continue relating to the high school characters. So the Drew Barrymore and the teacher character, I was relating to everybody and in real time. And it wasn't like where you're watching Varsity Blues now and you're relating to the parents and the kids. No. I mean this in the sense of like in real time, because one's just past me and one's just behind me. And so there were a lot of movies like that then. I don't think there were many movies like that in the early 90s or the 80s. They were teen movies made for teens.
Yeah, like Breakfast
Period.
Club.
The end.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Regardless of how good they were or smart they were or sincere they were teen movies made for teens. These are other things accidentally masquerading to the public as teen movies.
Man, that's why this movie, right? And I gotta say, on top of it being quite subversive, and also there's a scene where Kirsten Dunst pushes Denise Richards and says, "Bring it on," and that made me very happy because like 2 years later she's in Bring It On. But I love the scene when they're like, "Oh, say the states in alphabetical order," and then she starts off, and at the end she just nails it. I love how just alive that is, and how